Hello, my name is Patrick Brett, and this is my Pioneer Project for Women in Sport. In the history of the world, women have been oppressed in many different ways, such as voting rights, rights for their own bodies, and their place in sports. Women have had less opportunities and still have less opportunities today. My pioneer, Kathrine Switzer, my superstar, Jenny Simpson, and my interviewee, Marley Berg, were all first for their sports in many different ways. From being nearly tackled off the course at the Boston Marathon, to being the first woman to run the steeplechase at the Olympics, they achieved mile markers that would pave the way for future generations. For my pioneer, I chose Kathrine Switzer. She was born in 1947 in Amberg, Germany. She attended Syracuse University, where she studied English literature and journalism. At her time, women were considered too fragile to run a marathon, and mainly anything over 800 meters, so she decided to train and finish the race herself. She finished the Boston Marathon in 4 hours and 20 minutes, and today she is currently the president of 261 Fearless Inc. While at Syracuse University, she began training with the University Mailman and 15-time finisher of the Boston Marathon, Arnie Briggs. After months of training and talking about the Boston Marathon, Switzer snapped and said, "Oh, let's quit talking about the Boston Marathon and run the damn thing." After arguing for a few minutes, Arnie told her that the distance was too long and she was too fragile to complete it. Switzer fired back that Bobby Gibbs jumped in the year before and finished it. Briggs and Switzer agreed that if she ran the full 26.2 miles in practice, he paid for her entry fee and bring her to the starting line himself. 3 weeks before the marathon, Switzer and Briggs set out for their time trial. After hitting 26 miles and feeling great, Switzer pushed Briggs to run an extra loop, and they ran 31 miles altogether. Switzer was excited and happy, but Briggs collapsed from the exhaustion. The next day, Briggs and Switzer checked the AAU handbook and noticed there wasn't any gender-specific rules regarding the marathon, and these rules also applied to the BAA and Boston Marathon. The next day, they filled out the entry fee under K. Switzer and paid the $3, and they were on their way to Boston shortly after. Switzer was given the bib number 261. She set off from Hopkinton to Boston in grueling conditions, which were freezing rain, sleet, and wind. The first few miles she received nothing but cheers and compliments from fellow runners, such as, "It's great to see a girl out here," and "Can you talk to my wife? I'd love to get her into running and run the race with me." Around mile 4, a press truck came up, and shortly after, Switzer heard Jock Semple coming up behind her and tried pushing off the course, yelling, "Get the hell out of my race and give me those numbers." Arnie tried getting Semple to back off, but all of a sudden, her boyfriend Tom Miller, who was running with them, body checked Semple off the course and onto the sidewalk. Semple was known for these tactics because the year before, a man was running the race in a snorkel mask and diver fins, and Semple used the same tactics, ran up behind him and pushed him off the course and made sure he didn't get up. Here are 3 photos from the famous incident. You can see Switzer looking back and seeing Semple giving her a death glare, trying to get her off the course when her boyfriend pushed him away. After the incident, Switzer thought about quitting right there and then, but stated, "The thought was only a flicker. I knew if I quit, nobody would ever believe that women had the capability to run 26+ miles. If I quit, everybody would say it was a publicity stunt. If I quit, it would set women's sports back, way back, instead of forward. If I quit, I never run Boston. If I quit, Jock Semple and all those men like him would win. My fear and humiliation turned to anger." She also went on to say she wanted to prove everyone wrong and show that it did mess up your body, and women can run farther than 800 meters. These are both common claims that we heard in Dare to Compete that kept women from competing in sports and exercising. After finishing and proving just about everyone wrong, the photos of her being pushed away, finishing and sitting on a table with bloody feet were on every major newspaper in the United States and world. Sadly, it took another 5 years and many petitions before women would be officially allowed to run the Boston Marathon. Here is a clip of Kathrine Switzer finishing the Boston Marathon in 2017, 50 years after the first time.
We have an incredible live picture to start this broadcast off with right now. In the center of your screen, in the visor with number 261, proudly on her bib, Kathrine Switzer, the first official woman to run the Boston Marathon back in 1967, doing it again here 50 years later at the age of 70.
And running it with an official number, but no one at that time knew she was a woman. Kathrine Switzer entered as KV Switzer. No one was the wiser, assuming she was a man. And from Heartbreak Hill on, she said she knew that she was running for much more than just herself. She said now she runs to give women opportunities around the world, particularly in places where they're not allowed to go to school, where they're not allowed to drive, where they don't have the freedoms that we enjoy in this country and in so many others. And you see that big hug there. Kathrine Switzer running this race today on the 50th anniversary of her run in 1967, when Jacques Semple, the BAA race director, tried to bounce her off the course when someone on the lead truck said, "Hey, there's a woman in this race."
And we've seen the incredible footage of it. She says it was terrifying at the moment. It was the worst thing that ever happened to her, she said, at the moment. But she finished that race, and she finished the race again today. Big smile on her face. She said she was just running just to soak it all in today. She hadn't set a time for herself. She had no expectations. But I tell you what, Lisa, some of the people who helped to organize the race about an hour and a half ago told me, we think she's coming in at 3:58. And didn't she come in almost to the minute? She kept a great pace. She made it. And there she is with the BAA president.
That's right. Joanne Flaminio giving Kathrine Switzer a big hug right there. Kathrine today joined by 125 members of the Fearless 261 team and 7 men in that group among all those women, because she said that day in 1967, men took care of her on that course. And she holds that medal up very, very proudly. Kathrine knew more than a year ago she wanted to come back and celebrate the 50th anniversary of that race, and she did it in such an inclusive, wonderful way.
And just to give you an idea of how things have changed, 50 years later, more than 13,000 women ran here today. She didn't just change the marathon, she changed competitive running and running in general here in America.
Kathrine Switzer is currently the president of 261 Fearless Inc. They are a global nonprofit organization founded by Switzer herself. She said, we use running as a vehicle to empower and unite women through the creation of local running clubs, education programs, communication platforms, and social running events. We aim to break down the barrier of geography and create a global community for women runners of all abilities to support, encourage, and inspire each other towards a positive sense of self and fearlessness. They plan on opening more clubs globally and internationally in the near future. Some later athletic achievements of Kathrine Switzer included winning the women's race at the New York City Marathon in 1972 in a time of 3 hours, 7 minutes, and 29 seconds. She came back to Boston and finished the women's race second overall in a lifetime best of 2 hours, 51 minutes, and 37 seconds. From the reading Back to the Future, the article, quote, the article said, only 16,000 women participated in intercollegiate athletics in 1966. A decade later, the number had grown over 64,000 and now stands at 158,000. Growth and participation occurred both at the elite level and the participation for its own sake level. This article was written in 1991, and today, according to the NCAA, there are now 173,170 women in the NCAA. To compare it to Kathrine Switzer, there was no women's cross-country team or track team at Syracuse when she attended there, and now they have a nationally ranked team year in, year out for their women. There are still less women in the men in NCAA, where the men have close to 250,000. But Title IX has helped women get the chance to be equal with men and have a voice in colleges in many different ways, especially by paving the way for athletics. For my superstar, I chose Jenny Simpson. She was born in Webster City, Iowa in 1987. She competed for Oviedo High School in Florida, where she set state records in the mile, 2-mile, 5,000-meter run, and 3-mile. She competed for the University of Colorado, where she won 3 NCAA titles in the steeplechase. In 2009, which would be her last track season in a Colorado uniform, she set collegiate records in the mile, 3,000-meter, 5,000-meter indoors, 1,500-meter, 3K steeple, and 5,000-meter outdoors. 3 of these records still stand: the 1,500, the 5K outdoors, and the mile. Her 3,000-meter record was just broken by Karissa Schweizer at the Millers Games 2 weeks ago. Jenny Simpson was one of the first women to compete in the women's steeplechase in the Olympics by qualifying at the U.S. Olympic Trials, where she placed 3rd. This event was not added until the Beijing Olympics in 2008, and it existed for the men since the 1930s. She qualified for the finals and placed 9th. At the 2009 World Champs in Berlin, she placed 5th in the steeplechase final and set an American record of 9 minutes and 12 seconds. She ended up dropping the event and choosing to focus on the 1500 for the rest of her career. Jenny set a bar for the steeplechase for the next generation. Her training partner Emma Coburn became the first U.S. woman to medal in it at the Olympics in Rio, and she won a world title a year later in a massive upset, where fellow teammate Corny Frerichs placed second. At the 2011 World Champs in Daegu, Jenny won the 1500, which made her the first U.S. woman to win it since 1983, where Mary Decker won it. At the Rio Olympics, she finished third in the 1500, which was the first medal won by a woman in the 1500 at the Olympics. There are a lot of talented U.S. women to come close, such as Mary Decker or Susie Favor-Hamilton, but she was the one to finally do it. Women never had nearly as much of a chance in the Olympics from the start. At the 1900 Olympics, there were only 22 women, but the number steadily rose over the years. But there was a huge improvement from 72 to 76 when the IOC added rowing, basketball, and handball, and the numbers kept climbing from there. At the 2016 Olympics, women made up nearly 45% of the participants. After looking at these statistics, I decided to look a little deeper, especially for the 1500, and I found out that wasn't added until 1972 for the women. Athletics was added in 1928, but it took a long while just to get the 1500 added, which is a premier event across the world, which means that the only events were the 800 and less at the Olympics for women. For my interviewee, I chose my assistant coach, Marley Berg. She attended Chelmsford High School, where she ran cross-country, indoor, and outdoor track. She competed in youth softball and soccer, and in grade school she played soccer, basketball, and softball. In high school she ran cross-country, indoor, and outdoor track and field, town basketball, and softball. And while at Westfield State, she ran cross-country and competed in indoor track and outdoor track and field. I asked her how she got involved with running, and she told me she got involved because in the 5th grade, the gym teacher started having a school-wide mile run in the spring. Everyone would do it, so my friends and I would have a competition to try and beat all the guys. But when high school started, I intended to play basketball and use cross-country to get in shape, but fell in love with it and developed a curiosity, so I stuck with it and joined track as well. Martha told me she had a very large supportive family, especially her father, who was excited to get me into it. I also had a lot of opportunities in the city of Chelmsford. And for a historic milestone, she said, I'd have to say that in 2009 I was part of the first group of women to compete in the pentathlon at the NCAA Indoor Championships. She ended up winning the overall high jump at that year's championships. I found an article written by the Boston Globe after she won her high jump title that talks about the pentathlon and her experience at nationals. I'll put the link in my description if anyone wants to read it. I was also surprised to find out that the NCAA didn't add the heptathlon until 2009 because it had been around since the 1980s, and some unofficial results had it shown up in the 1920s. But the event wasn't recognized by the IAAF, the International Association of Athletics Federation, until 1995 as an official event, and the NCAA didn't recognize it until 2009. I asked, if you had the power to go back in time and change one thing, what would it be? Marley told me, to allow women to have a voice and not see gender, race, etc. I wish more women were heard and more strong female influences were covered in grade school when these women were pioneering and they weren't being covered. Schools covered the basics but nothing beyond the top layer. Male athletes were worshipped and covered all the time, but women weren't given the attention. So to sum it up, give the athletes who are making history a voice and the attention they deserved. And I asked her, what women in sport did and do you look up to? Marley told me, when I was very young, Michelle Kwan, I think it's because she looked like me, to be honest, not many women did. And Jenny Beringer Simpson is someone I've looked up to for a long time. I appreciate and continue to appreciate how she carries herself and sets an example for young girls and women. In the last 4 weeks and in a few different classes, I've learned a lot about the struggle of women in the U.S. and internationally. It's opened my eyes. You see that women were constantly pushed down in sports and not given a tenth of the chance that men had. They were told that reproductive systems would be messed up if they exercised, and that they couldn't handle running anything over 800 meters, which are common themes in the readings and videos we've watched and read. Women have come a long way since the since 1900, where only 22 women competed in the Olympics, and now there are nearly 5,000. There's still a long way to